And we're on.
This is Live from the Table, the official podcast of New York's world-famous Comedy Cellar, coming at you on Sirius XM 99 Raw Dog. And on the Laugh Button Podcast Network, Dan Naturman here with Noam Dworman, the owner of the world-famous Comedy Cellar. Periel Aschenbrand, our producer, is here, sitting right next to me in the bathroom. It's a long story. And we also have Seaton Smith is with us. He's a comedian, Comedy Cellar regular. He's an actor. His special, The Lockdown Special, can be seen on EPIX. And how is everybody tonight? This is a crazy, crazy week. We'll get to all the craziness in a little bit. Though first, should we explain to the people watching on YouTube why Periel and I are sitting next to each other in a bathroom?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, we're doing the show from the studio at the Comedy Cellar. However, the studio is not set up, so we have to do it in separate rooms so that we can't all sit in front of the same computer. So Seaton's in another room. We're in the bathroom so that we don't hear him when he's talking and then hear him a second later on our screen, which would be disconcerting. So we have to be in the bathroom.
Well, wait, but it's supposed to be at the table, but it can't be at the table because there's a comedy show going on in the olive tree because they're using the olive tree as a room to do shows.
That's correct, because Noam was trying to squeeze a few extra, I don't want to say dollars, let's just say a few extra, a few extra seats. So he's doing shows in the restaurant because he can only do a third capacity.
Right.
So he has.
I kind of thought I was just trying to find a way to give some more spots to comedians, but you're right, Dan. I think we should just stop these shows.
Well, okay.
Wait, and then with the comics used to zoom in because once COVID happened, we just started doing it by Zoom. But now the comics can't just zoom in anymore because people are starting to perform again. So we wanted Seaton to come on, but Seaton couldn't do it unless he had a place to do it. You know, you should be thanking me that I'm going through these hijinks to figure out how to do the show.
I would mention that normally when I drag.
Can you read the bubble over my head? Can you read the bubble over my head? It says Periel's husband is a saint. That's all I'm thinking of right now. Like, oh my God! Imagine having her yell at you in the bathroom. Oh my God.
Can I get my joke out? I guess not. It's ruined by now.
I'm sorry. I couldn't hear your joke over the
in the bathroom. It's not to do a podcast.
It's not good to talk over each other to Zoom, guys.
Anyway, I was at the. I did want to, before we get into this week's craziness, I did do a show here Saturday, my first show back, and I just wanted to give you my impressions, if I may.
Okay.
It was good. You know, everybody's separated by plexiglass, so it's a little weird, and there's only a third of the normal audience, but everybody seemed happy to be there, and I had some great new jokes, absolutely killer, that I had been backlogged, you know, throughout the pandemic related and otherwise. I had a good new joke about the Second Amendment, which I won't do here, but suffice it to say, it did well, and is quite timely, you know, given everything that's going on. Seaton, we haven't seen you.
Yes, sir.
I'm good to see you. I guess we've seen you. You've been on the podcast before. By the way, I just spoke to Wayne Fetterman today, who did our show a few weeks ago. His book is selling well, and he said our podcast was the best one that he's done.
Nice.
So I don't know if that means anything. Seaton, any news on Seaton's end? You got a special out currently, the lockdown special?
News, man, news. I've had the best COVID of my life. I'll admit that. I've done. I did a lot of fun things. Let's see, fun news. I got I did special came out on EPIX. I did this fun commercial series for NCAA tournament. That was really dope. And I don't know. I think I might do an MMA fight this summer, or maybe just a kickboxing fight. You know, just enjoying the life. Are
you an MMA fighter? I didn't know that about you.
It's just a hobby. I just can't help. It's just one of those things. Some people, you know, no one plays a guitar. I tend to kick people sometimes. It's an art thing. That's all.
So I was listening to Sam Harris's podcast in the car the other day, and apparently he was saying that he was recommending that all the police forces in the country be taught jujitsu. because apparently he thinks it's the most effective close-range way of subduing somebody without hurting them, and that it gives people an advantage despite a tremendous size disparity. For instance, Chauvin was 145 pounds and Floyd was over 200 pounds. Apparently, with jiu-jitsu, Chauvin would have been able to control Floyd even with those skills. Do you know anything about that? Is that true in your opinion?
I mean, yeah. When we saw that happen, even my jiu-jitsu friends, we looked at that situation like, if George Floyd knew some moves, he would have gotten that knee off of him and been okay. But like, yeah, I do believe cops need to learn how to. I'm trying to be careful with this language here because I see a lot of cops actually doing that. There are cops in like, for example, San Antonio. They actually put cops in like a ring and actually make them like put them in the worst situations possible in order to make them comfortable in these situations. And it just seems like a lot of these cops we see in videos seem to be like 2 or 3 years on the job and have no training, and they just go like, just do the dumbest things possible. Except Derek Chauvin is completely different. That was some personal shit that got into the racial atmosphere, but that was a personal beef that was completely, I don't know. I mean, they knew each other for months. They were fighting for months. This was just like, that's why it was so ugly to me.
Well, we've heard that, but that didn't come up at all at trial, as far as I know. So it
wouldn't have helped anybody to bring that up. It wouldn't have helped the prosecution to mention that they knew each other, because then the race angel was gone, and then it would not help the defense to know, because then it makes them even more guilty. So it just was pushed out. But he specifically knew each other. They knew, and like they beat off. I know they had a fight, like a close to fight, because they were both security guards for that club. And yeah, the cop was doing security guard for like, I don't know, night, and he was being, your cop during the day, and just what's that phrase when you're like have a second job as a cop? Moonlight. Yeah, he's moonlighting as that. My bad. And then I think George was also that. So that was, I don't know. It was just.
But wouldn't it have helped?
Personal too. I don't know. I've had cops put guns in my face. I've had racist situations. It never feels that personal. It's always they're on their head. It's always disconnected. That was some personal murder shit.
Wouldn't it have helped the prosecution to be able to show that Chauvin was acting with intentional animus there? You'd think.
It may, but I mean, that would just add another layer to the narrative of already this dude is racist. Let's just put him out for like, I just don't think you need it. It's almost like the reason why OJ was let off. It was like, yeah, the evidence was iffy, but also we put a lot of black people in jail by accident. So let's just say sorry. That's what this is. This was like, yo, he is a murderer. He's completely wrong. We've been wrong for a long time. We got to put him in jail, or let's have a bunch of riots.
Can I ask you a really deep question? And I don't know how I feel about the answer to this. I know that some people will find the very question offensive, but human nature is tricky. Do you think that the people who are most invested in the narrative that America is hopelessly racist and based on white supremacy, those people who spend the most time in their lives devoted to fighting for that, do you think they were in their gut happy with this verdict? Or do you think in some way, and I'll say one more thing out, do you think in some way they were like not happy to see that narrative chipped away at a bit? And I'm going to tell you why I always think that. Do you remember when OJ got off? Do you remember they had shots of all over the country, the jubilation, especially in the black community? I mean, it came from the gut. It was like, wow! Like it was explosive happiness when OJ got off. That was real. I didn't see that. I didn't see that when Chauvin got convicted. I didn't see the happiness. And it made me think maybe there was at least ambivalence about how they wanted this to come out, because it does. I mean, I've had these dark human reactions to things sometimes where I didn't want something to happen because I didn't want to be proven wrong, even though it was better if I'd be wrong. You know what I mean? It's
yes.
tricky.
I'm going to say your interpretation of apathy may be a little misinterpreted in that. Here's an analogy.
Okay.
When one of my relationships was falling apart and we all knew it was over, I knew it was over when she said, "Hey, let's have sex later." And I remember going, "Yeah, I just don't care anymore." And I just walked in, went to bed. It's like one of those things like, well, it's been a long time. It's been like structurally speaking, the internet really started introducing like police murders around 2014. I was watching. 2014 is when it started to get 2015 got super heavy. Now that's like 7 years of heavy videos every day of people like me getting shot by the cops. At one point, you start to break and you go like, I don't give a fuck what the fuck you do. I'm gonna kill everybody in here, and I'm gonna kill this. Like it's like a snapping point. So that's what I'm saying. You might be reading, but on the flip side, and this is a bigger picture to me, because this is me. This is my own. I've been in my own little personal kind of understanding of this whole race thing. I grew up. Let's be clear, if anybody's listening. My father's a political science professor. He wrote 7 books on this, the systematic oppression. I grew up doing protests. I think about race constantly, and I would legitimately start to breathe and think to myself, I think there's something bigger going on that we're not, as all Americans, thinking. Like every group has figured out a way to believe that another group is all trying to kill us. And like just on the small level of things, the gun issue really seems to be more the narrative of everything. Everybody, like, yes, cops, like the fact that cops say, listen, we're not killing that many black people. We're killing white people just as much. That's their best offense, nigga? That means there's more, and the more time, and then so Derek Chauvin gets convicted, but then the next day or that night or night before, another black woman gets shot, right? But then if you turn the paper, you also see there's been, what, 40 mass murders in the last, like the record, we're like, you know, lapping the records we've had in 100 years within like 3 months. So I mean, there's just more and more evidence of this whole mass murder of gun things just getting to the point we're gonna pop, yo. There's like too many people dying. Like one day, school's gonna get shot, a building's gonna get shot, a black man's gonna get shot. Everybody's gonna die one day. Everybody, not everybody. There's gonna be every one of these stories gonna happen in one day, and we're all gonna lose it. And I think we're getting close to Australia, in my opinion. I think we're getting closer. There's gonna be like a big overhaul. Like fuck it, but I don't know. We've been saying that for years. But right, like, okay, last point. Have you noticed every time a cop says, I had to shoot that person, is because we thought they had a gun. You take that argument out of there, what else is there?
Well, a couple times lately it was with a knife. Like today, this girl got shot, was it yesterday? I don't know when she got
yesterday.
shot.
Yeah, she got shot yesterday.
The body cam shows her stabbing her friend or stabbing the woman she's with.
Yeah. I mean,
but you're right. But usually
weird.
Guns do way more damage. I mean, if we just had the knives, it would be a different ballgame altogether.
Yeah, if there's only a knife country, we'd tasering up people like that. So I mean, hey, I'm not in that situation. I don't want to judge. I know I'm afraid. I know. Again, I don't. Whatever. I'm sorry. What are you gonna say?
One question I asked on my Facebook page and it didn't get an answer because my questions never get answers on Facebook. I never get actual discussion. I just get hollering. But not that people necessarily know this, but I was wondering, in England, most of the cops don't have guns. If they had confronted a situation like the situation in Columbus, where the young girl had her hand up with a knife in it, looked like she was about to stab her friend, how are the English cops trained to deal with that? Or would they have sent a special unit with guns if they had gotten a call that said someone had a knife?
We don't have to do that. We don't have to go to like England to do that. All we have to do is literally look at a white guy with a knife and go, well, how do you treat that guy? Because they don't shoot that guy. They don't shoot him as much. They really don't. Like, I mean, I know I'm negating my point, but I mean, there's so many videos online right now. There's a video literally I can show you right now of a white guy with a knife just swinging at the cops, and they're all going, "Come on, guy!" Like it's.
Well, this is a good example. This is a good example of the kind of the point I made at the beginning, which I'm not sure of. So there was this case not long ago of this mass shooter, and people were all out in front of it because they took him alive. Is that right? And they said, oh, he must be a white guy, right? And here comes another white mass shooter, blah blah blah. And then it turned out it wasn't a white guy. And you would think that people who are upset about white supremacy and about white mass shooters be like, oh, good, it wasn't a white guy, you know. But no, they were disappointed to find out it wasn't a white guy. You know, they wanted it to be another white guy, and they were disappointed that the non-white guy didn't get killed because they wanted it to be that only the white guy doesn't get killed. You know, so they're so invested in the narrative that even though the life is saved, they're disappointed. So.
Well, your situation you just brought up is more or less like a broken clock is right twice kind of situation. I mean, the likelihood of a black dude getting like let off in this situation, we just know just practically that's low.
He wasn't black. He wasn't black. He wasn't black. He was Arab.
Oh, see, that's even more interesting. You're right. That's interesting. But it's like, even the fact that we could have this conversation going, what do you think a white cop's going to shoot more? Like, and we all can honestly have our own different opinions on the shit. Makes you speak of the bigger problem of like, yo, we've, our capability of violence is getting to the point of a tipping point, as I'm saying. Like, I really, I don't know. I just look at these signs of guns. I'm like,
I don't know why people made fun. I don't know why Arabs are not white. I know some of them are not white, but Steve Jobs is Syrian. Was he not white?
I mean, there's that argument of like, once you make a certain amount of money, you stop. Color is not an issue anymore.
Why are Jews white? Why are Jews white, but Arabs not? I mean, a lot of them are identical.
First of all,
when Jews transport it, though, am I confused?
Everybody has a different definition of what white is. White is a term that's fluid, that's changed over time. Some people would say Jews are white. Some people would say Jews are not white. Some people would say an Arab is white. Some people say an Arab is not white. Some people would say it depends on the Arab. There's no clear answer to that.
And they use what's convenient because, of course, like we never heard the term white Hispanic until Trayvon Martin, and then it was important to define George Zimmerman as white and not Hispanic, right?
The term white didn't really start until there was slavery. White didn't exist until there was oppressive system. So it's actually the term. So your argument of Steve Jobs being white, it does fit because he fits in the oppressive system. And yes, like again, that dude Zimmerman got off the white system. So yeah, he became white once the government said, "It's all right, man, kill as many blacks as you can."
Well, I mean that case was that case reminded me of the Mike Tyson case. Mike Tyson, I thought was improperly convicted, and I think that George Zimmerman was probably the right verdict. Only because nobody could tell you what really happened. You know, you have conflicting stories, and you're supposed to presume the guy innocent. It's not easy to do that. But you had one witness said this guy was on top, and the other witness said the other guy was on top. I mean, what are you gonna do? I don't know.
I would send him to jail.
Yeah, I think George Zimmerman, we could say, what the fuck is this stand your ground law? What the hell is he out there looking for trouble? What kind of gangster wannabe is this George? I mean, all that. There's nothing about George Zimmerman that's not on paper reprehensible. But the fact is, under that law, was stand your ground, and the question was who was on top of who. And you saw the photo of George Zimmerman all bloodied up. You know, what are you gonna do? I don't know. I don't know how to say beyond a reasonable doubt I knew what happened. I don't know. Just like Mike Tyson was an outrage because how does anybody know what happened in that hotel room?
Oh man, you just conflated a race crime with a rape crime, and I don't want to defend either one.
No,
I'm gonna go back to the race side.
Crime. It's the notion that we take our system seriously, which is that you don't convict somebody unless it's proven. Hi, Laura. Lara, is it pronounced Laura? Because I always spell Lara. It always confuses me.
Lara.
Laura.
Well,
Tara.
let me
Tara.
the introduction, Noam. You know, it's one of the few times I get to really express myself.
Go ahead, Dan.
This is sort of my gig on this show is I do introductions. Lara Bazelon is a professor of the University of San Francisco School of Law, where she holds the Barnett Chair in Trial Advocacy, directs the Criminal and Juvenile Justice and Racial Justice Clinic. Her first novel, a courtroom thriller titled A Good Mother, will be published next month.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
That's so hard.
On Kirkus.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that.
I want to say a word about Lara Bazelon preemptively because I don't know how the rest of the conversation will turn out. But I do want to say the following. She is one of my heroes, whether she knows it or not. And not because I think we don't agree on a lot. I think we probably do agree on a lot when it comes to criminal justice, at least in terms of civil liberties. But she is one of the rare, if not one of the only people I know who is courageous with her principles in her milieu where people don't really appreciate her being courageous with the principles, such that despite that she despised Donald Trump as much as anybody could despise Donald Trump, she did write that column that we had her on last time about exposing some very improper things that Kamala Harris did keeping guilty people in prison while she was in California. And that took tremendous courage to do. And she got a lot of flack for it. And so I just want to say that, like I said, even if we have a terrible fight and you call me names, I will always never say a bad word about you, because you've proven yourself in a way that very few people ever do. And I'll tell you one other thing. I asked the guy Yasha Mounk from The Atlantic,
Yeah.
you know, Yasha, he's our kind of friends. And I was asking one time, I said, you know, do you think you would have the courage to risk your life in a war? Like, you see people that they go off to war. I'm like, and I can't imagine myself risking my life, like signing up to go fight, you know? And he said to me, he says, well, you'd think, he said, but actually, if you look at history, people do that quite easily. He said, it's people standing up for their principles among their peers, which is really the rarer form of bravery. And then he spun that out. And that point hit me right between the eyes. He says, people go off with their friends, they sign up, we're gonna go off to war, there's camaraderie, whatever it is. But people who stand up in a room full of people say, no, 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 and expose themselves in that way, he says that's a much rarer thing to do. So anyway, that's enough puffing up Lara Bazelon. But that's
so much love, Noam. I can't
I
believe
really
it.
feel that way.
I wasn't here last time Lara was on. I forgot where I was, but nice to meet you. Nice to meet one of Noam's heroes.
Nice to meet you too, and I love the way you said Barnett instead, like when you were saying the Barnett Chair. It sounded very important.
I said Barnett, right?
Yeah, but you just had a little like in it that just
As a lilt.
I don't know, gave it a little lift.
I live in my Boston Brahmin accent, even though I'm not from Boston.
All right, let's talk about the Chauvin case.
Obviously.
Now let's talk about, first of all, the good things. I'll list a few good things. The good things are clearly that do they call it the thin blue line? What's that analogy for the police that never testify on each other? The what?
The thin blue line, yes.
Yeah, the thin blue line, at least for once, was crossed. The cops seemed to testify against each other. As a matter of fact, I had a friend who's a cop and had just left the NYPD, and he was texting me and he said, this is terrible police work. He seemed happy that the cops were testifying. So that was good to see. I think it's also good to see more and more how much body cameras have changed the world. We said 7 or 8 years ago when Obama was still president, I said that if he wanted to do one thing, he should see to it that every single police interaction in the country was videotaped. And can you just imagine the kind of beatings that were going on regularly, wanton, sadistic beatings before these cameras? I mean,
well, we know Justin Volpe. I mean, that was one that actually did result in a conviction. I mean, how many years ago was that?
Yeah, but that's because he had medical evidence of a plunger in his ass. But that's what it took, you know. But I'm saying like this, and I used to see it on the street as a little boy. I would see cops, not to this level, but I would see cops roughing people up. I saw a cop smash a cab driver's head into his taxi at 6 in the morning when he was trying to get a falafel sandwich, simply because he didn't move his car fast enough. And the guy just crumpled to the ground, like, I don't know if he totally knocked out, but, you know, seeing stars for nothing, just nothing. And you think that anybody would have believed him? The cop would have said you resisted arrest, or, I mean, who knows, or, you know, it would have had a story.
All the black people on the block would have believed him.
Well, that's right. And we talked about OJ before, and that's why they cheered OJ getting off, right? It's this reality. So I've never been naive to that. And I would also say, because I want to get into what I think the parts of the verdict I'm uncomfortable with, but I would also say, just at the end of the story, those last 3 minutes or so when Chauvin was on top of Floyd and Floyd was just going limp, there's no way that Chauvin knew he wasn't killing him. Meaning that I want to focus a little bit on the causation and my misgivings about that case. But without regard to the causation, this guy had no way of knowing whether the guy was dying of a fentanyl or what he was dying of. All he knew was that life was leaving this guy, right? And he did nothing. He did nothing. And so in that sense,
so talking about Chavin did nothing?
What's that?
You talking about
Chauvin
Chavin did
nothing. I mean, he just.
No, I think he did something very specific. He put his knee on his back. He killed him.
No, I'm saying,
he
look, yeah, I mean, maybe I'm not being clear. I'm saying at the end, when it was clear that he wasn't screaming anymore, he wasn't ready, you give him the benefit of the doubt, he said he could still have gotten up. He could still, all the excited delirium, all the things he's claiming. There's some point at the end, and it's like a third of the thing, where none of those excuses line up anymore. Even your partner said, hey, maybe you should ease up, right? And he did nothing. And that is, it's just important to bring that out, no matter what you think about all the other issues that I want to talk about. So I'll stop there and let Laura has any comments about what she thinks, and then I want to go to some of the issues.
So are we doing this pre-recording?
Yes.
Pre-recorded, yeah.
So now I'm wasting these insights and giving you ammunition to rebut me by previewing my comments?
What do you mean?
Is that how this is going to work?
No, I don't know what you mean. We're not pre-recording. No, we're recording now.
Okay.
I mean, we're not live, is what I meant.
So, I mean, I want to, at some point, because you had Periel send me this study, so I do want to talk to you about that, because I have a feeling you're going to want to talk about that. But I mean, I think it's really important to think about what he was actually charged with and convicted of.
Okay. He
wasn't charged with a crime that required intent to kill. In fact, the opposite, the most serious charge, second-degree murder, is an unintentional killing, unintentional during the commission of a felony.
Right.
So all the jury had to find was that he was committing a felony, i.e. assault. And I think that seemed pretty overwhelming, at least to me, that you are assaulting someone when you're holding them down in the manner that the whole world saw in that video. And then as a result of that act, he died. Now, it sounds like maybe believe that
I'll say what about
there's an issue with the causation, but there's no requirement that he ever intended to kill, not for any of the charges.
I didn't say there was. I didn't mean to imply there was. Yeah, but okay. It's good to explain that. That's what I said. I wasn't saying he needed intent to kill.
But I mean, you also seem to be suggesting that in some way, maybe there wasn't a direct causal relationship between the action and the death, but it seemed to me like the medical testimony on that point was overwhelming. And then the jury instruction said, look, there can be multiple causes, but if his knee on Mr. Floyd's neck was one of them, he can't escape responsibility. And so at that point, I don't know how you don't find causation, but maybe other people disagree with me.
Let's get into the causation, but I don't want to start with it, but let's get into the causation. So this was my uncomfortableness with the causation thing. And Laura understands what I'm about to say, but I just want everybody in the public to understand that when you go to law school, they teach you that you have to prove something beyond a reasonable doubt. It's not enough to say, you're really, really sure he did it. I mean, come on, it's overwhelmingly probable that he did it or that it happened. You have to be able to prove it with what you would regard as certainty. The kind of certainty I kind of think about, like, would I trust my kid's life on a certainty like that, So having said that, well, how do I want to start this? So the way I saw it was this. Oh, by the way, let's frame it this way also. So just yesterday, we found out that this guy Sicknick, the Capitol cop, didn't die of the fire extinguisher or the spray. You heard that, right? And I was having arguments at the time with people said, listen, we don't know what he died of. I made a kind of a smart ass argument that every person that drops dead was somewhere the day before. And it's not, the correlation is not causation. They have to prove that he died because of that spray. And people say, you're crazy. Like, I got in bad arguments with it about it. And sure enough, it came out, well, there's no evidence. Actually, on the contrary, actually, the evidence shows that he didn't have a reaction to the spray. So that's the kind of difference between reasonable doubt and probability. We're all pretty sure he died from what happened at the Capitol. But to say we had reasonable doubt would have meant to look pretty dumb. And Laura actually defends a lot of people getting them out of prison who were sent to prison by people who closed that loop just a little bit too easily. So, okay, so what I saw in the trial was the following. One expert said this hold was enough to kill anybody. This positional asphyxia would have killed a perfectly healthy man. It would have killed somebody with bad heart condition. It had nothing to do with any of his fentanyl, nothing. It was just.
That was Tobin that said that.
Was that Tobin? Yeah.
Tobin that said that.
Yeah. The next person said this was positional asphyxia. He didn't say neck, by the way. He said pressure on the chest and back. It was exacerbated by his conditions, but this was positional asphyxia. And the third guy, Baker, who was the only one who examined him, actually said there was no evidence of asphyxia at all. And I wrote here what the.
I remember that. That was hilarious when that came out.
Okay, so it says this is from the New York Times. The defense asked Baker whether fentanyl could have caused the lung abnormalities. Baker said it was possible, but less likely than other causes. The defense, now when I say less likely, my next question would have been, so it's possible. You're saying less, you didn't say, no, it didn't cause less likely. But more importantly, when I see three different experts on causation have three different opinions, two of which are mutually exclusive, the first and the last are mutually exclusive opinions, I say to myself, how is that not reasonable doubt? Yes, they all are of the opinion that he caused the death, but they don't have the same opinion, which to me undermines all their opinions. Just like if you ask three economists, what are the causes of the Great Depression? And they give you three different opinions, you don't know what to do. But the fourth thing they do all agree on is, and I'm almost finished, that the amount of fentanyl in his system was 3 times a lethal dose. Now they say probably didn't kill him. He had tolerance to it. But here's how the Times reported Dr. Baker says. Dr. Baker said the level of fentanyl found in Mr. Floyd's system could be fatal in other circumstances, but that in Mr. Floyd's case, it was less likely cause of death than others. Doesn't say it's not the cause of death, less likely. That might be enough there to say reasonable doubt. Anyway, during Mr. Nelson's cross-examination, Dr. Baker acknowledged that he saw no physical signs of asphyxiation, that Mr. Floyd had a level of fentanyl in his system that could have been called an overdose in other circumstances, and that his heart condition combined with the exertion played a role in his death. He had an enlarged heart for his size, Mr. Baker said. It required more oxygen to continue pumping. These events are going to cause stress. I guess that's about the end of the fentanyl there. So I'm listening to that. I said, 3 opinions. This is the response I usually get left. 3 opinions. They don't all agree. And one opinion says it's less likely he died of a fentanyl overdose. And my next question would have been, doctors, how do you know he didn't die of a fentanyl overdose? He had enough fentanyl to kill him. How do you know beyond a reasonable doubt that it didn't kill him? Now,
if I was a doctor, I would be like, well, if you look at the video and we see how we choked him to death, then that would be the number one evidence. This phrase of there's no evidence.
That's what the doctors are going to answer.
It's a very tricky phrase.
Seaton, if a doctor answered that, Chauvin would get off. The doctor's got to answer me scientifically. Doctor can't just say, look at the video. He's got it. When the doctor says it's less likely, do you think this fentanyl killed him? Oh, that's less likely. I'm saying, well, you need to know because I'm about to put a man in jail for the rest of his life.
Right. Was that doctor the state police doctor? Because that's what the state coroner said. They said there's no evidence of asphyxiation. They said it was like probably something else. If that's the state, if that's there, then I think that their evidence would be any statement from them would be totally tainted since there's a clear history of letting people off. Right.
Let Lara answer me in a law. If I was in a law school class and you're my professor, what are you going to tell me, Mr. Dworman? You're wrong because
that's not what the jury instructions say. So I'm going to read you the jury instruction on causation, and then we can talk about the experts. To cause death, causing death, or cause the death means that the defendant's act or acts were a substantial causal factor in causing the death of George Floyd. The defendant is criminally liable for all of the consequences of his actions that occur in the ordinary and natural course of events, including those consequences brought about by one or more intervening causes, if such intervening causes were the natural result of the defendant's acts. The fact that other causes contribute to the death does not relieve the defendant of criminal liability.
Yeah, but it could have been the fentanyl by itself. He just said it was less likely.
I don't think that any doctor excluded the video and the pressure on the neck as a potential cause of death. That's not how I listened to the testimony. I thought that the state's experts were unanimous in saying that he died from a lack of oxygen flowing to his brain as a result of the pressure being placed on his neck.
No, that's not, no, I just read it to you. He said there was no evidence of asphyxiation. That's what Baker said. Now, listen, if I get anything wrong, then I would ask you please to come back on next week and correct me, because that's my worst nightmare. I literally have dreams about saying something wrong, as a matter of fact.
But I think we're talking past each other, because you're focused on this word asphyxia. And what I'm telling you is that the medical testimony was that he died, in plain English, because there wasn't enough oxygen getting to his brain to allow his body to function. And on that point, I believe everybody was unanimous. And even the doctor that was called by the defense, who, you know, was also just ripped apart on cross-examination, didn't dispute that was a cause.
No, can you die just because he didn't die?
Fentanyl can do that too. That's how fentanyl kills you. You're shut down. Go ahead.
That's an awfully big coincidence that the
fentanyl.
fentanyl comes in and kills him as he's lying there with someone's knee pressed on his neck for 9.5 minutes. But coincidentally, the fentanyl kicked in at that exact same moment and caused him to have a problem breathing.
That brings me to my next point.
I have a reasonable doubt on that.
That brings me to my next point. And this is where I think you actually will agree with me. So I would say that people die within a certain time zone of when they take their drugs. If you take a lethal amount of drugs at the time the cop is arresting you, you're going to die while he's arresting you. So it is quite a coincidence. Just like the guy Sicknick died the day after he was at the Capitol Police and got sprayed. But this is the thing, and this is the thing that bothers me most of all about this whole trial. Floyd was in a car with his, I think they say, allegedly drug dealer, Hall, right before Chauvin came. And the state would not give this guy immunity to testify. Now, I believe, and I know Lara agrees with me, that we're supposed to give the widest berth possible to a defendant to bring in evidence that they think will help their case when they are trying to keep themselves out of jail. If I'm trying to make the case that drug use was what was really behind all this. And by the way, there's the guy right over there. He was in the car and he can tell us how much drugs he's taken. He can tell us whether he's ever taken this much drugs before. He can tell us whether Floyd was passed out in the car or was fully awake just 10 minutes beforehand. And the state says, nope, we're not giving him immunity. When we know goddamn well, if that guy had something to say to help the prosecution's case, they would have given him immunity in a heartbeat. Now, where am I wrong on that?
You're not wrong on that, because immunity is at the almost sole discretion of the prosecution, and they wield it very, very selectively. And so they will give immunity to someone who is facing legal jeopardy and not charge them if it's helpful to their case, and they will decline to do that if it is not helpful to their case. And that is just standard operating prosecutor procedure.
It's horrible. Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm going to just dominate for a second and I'll stop. It's horrible. It's no different than withholding evidence. It's just a technical way of doing it. And when you put those two things together, these kind of, like, listen, if the prosecution had 3 experts all with exactly the same theory of how he died, if they could have said, no, this is not a lethal dose of fentanyl, or here's how you prove that he had a tolerance. There's so many ways that could have been tighter. But to have all this fuzzy stuff and at the same time not give immunity to this guy, I was like, this is not okay. And I was like, where is the ACLU when they're not giving immunity to a guy who could make us feel better in either direction, actually, about what really went on here? I think it's reprehensible. If I were in the Supreme Court, I would have to overturn a conviction based on that. Go ahead.
I feel you. I think the ACLU wanted to come, but the cop had the neck, the knee on the back. No, that joke didn't come out right. I was trying. Dude, everything you just said was crazy. You're telling me, George was sitting there buying drugs, and then for some reason he was like, hey, drug dealer, and he put all the drugs in his mouth at that point, and then he gets arrested and then happens to have just a random OD, and then this innocent white man who happens to just want to put his little knee on the back man's back just happens to get the wrong idea. It's just your whole narrative. Crazy.
None of what you're saying.
Hold on, no, I'm not done. No, I let you talk. No, I sent you the video day one. I sent you that video, and your very first reaction on was, "Oh my God, that's the worst thing I've ever seen in my life." A year later, now you've had time to talk about it. You're like, "Well, let's put some evidence in there because it's not on my side of my thought." I'm like, no, I think you're staring hard here. That will be counted on video.
I'll tell you. Hold on. I'll answer everything. First of all, that has nothing to do with a courtroom. I'm not. You put a ridiculous narrative in my mouth that I never said. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is that I can read into the fact that the prosecution didn't give him immunity. I read into that the fact that they thought he would hurt their case. That's what I read into that. If the Central Park joggers had wanted someone who was in the vicinity to have immunity to testify on their behalf, I wouldn't have to convince you what the fuck is going on here. Why won't they let these people testify? It must be because what they might say is not what they want to come out in that courtroom. I'm not saying anything.
No, I have to go do I gotta go do your show. I gotta leave.
Can I read you something? This is Justice Douglas. Seaton, listen, just stop for 1 second. This is Justice Douglas.
He has a spot at 7:45.
Yeah,
yes.
The principal. You got to turn your phone off then, Seaton, because you're
Sorry. Sorry. I'm talking to. Sorry.
Okay.
What?
The principal.
5 minutes. Okay. Sorry.
The principal.
What's up, no?
You got to mute.
My bad. Say it again, no?
The principle of Mooney versus Holohan, I don't know, is not punishment of society for misdeeds. All right, you got to mute, Seaton. You got to mute.
I got to mute me. Sorry.
It's not punishment of society for misdeeds of a prosecutor, but of avoidance of an unfair trial to the accused. And here's the next part. Society wins not only when the guilty are convicted, but when criminal trials are fair. If they are not giving immunity to somebody, we have every right to read into it a reason for that. And it wasn't because they thought this guy had committed a crime that was so great that it would be some sort of travesty to society to let this guy go free. It was for one reason only, because of what he might say.
Lara,
and that bothers me. Go ahead.
Okay, Lara, what if
she agrees with me? Go ahead, Lara.
Oh, I thought you said go ahead, Dan.
Go ahead, Dan.
Lara, if what he was doing, if what Chauvin did, the hold that he had placed on Mr. Floyd, if that were in accord with the Minneapolis police procedure, would that basically exonerate him, even if it was the cause of death? Would that have exonerated?
Good question.
So if it had been part of their procedure and training and at least one person would have testified to that, then it would have gone to the reasonableness of his use of force and whether or not it was reasonable with respect to the perceived threat that he was facing. And I feel like it would have been a closer question, but you have to deal with the second half of that 9 minutes where you're talking about someone who's proned out on the ground and is not resisting in any way. And so I think even if in some way it was allowed, maybe earlier on when you're talking about someone who's being combative, I still think it would have been a problem because it seems unreasonable once the person is motionless, helpless on the ground, begging for their life.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, I agree with you on that. That's why I'm not focusing on it. But I will tell you, I read that manual. And as like a boss who writes manuals to try to make sure that things come out the right way, that manual is like a textbook example of how to bring about a bad outcome. Because it does mention kind of in the fine print that there's such a thing as positional asphyxia. But the main, emphasized things are the picture of him holding him just like this. They use the word non-lethal hold. It quotes a legal opinion that emphasizes that even in handcuffs, it is reasonable for an officer to think that somebody could still get up and do harm, as opposed to the way I would have written the manual, which is big, all caps. Be very careful with this hold. You can kill somebody this way. Instead, the big caps are like all the different things of excited delirium and how superhuman strength. And if you look at it, it's like, of course, these people of mediocre IQs and little attention didn't get the message or could have gotten the message wrong. you wonder if they had written a proper manual and just did what I said, would Chauvin have done it? You know, I don't know.
Of course he would have. He knew he was killing him. He didn't fucking care. He wanted to kill him.
All right.
I mean, it's like, it's so obvious to anybody who has two eyes that he knew exactly what he was doing.
Why did he want to kill him?
They knew each other, Noam. They knew each other for a while, and they had a beef.
Yeah, but I mean, he knows he's being videotaped. I mean,
Well, so what? I mean, so he's a sociopath.
I can't say that what he wanted to kill him, but I would say that you probably couldn't prove that he wanted to kill him. Let me go back to where I left, because this is what is always impossible about this. If you want to tell me, do I think he probably very, 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 very likely killed him? I'm saying, yes, of course. I saw the video like everybody else. That's not the conversation I want to have. That's not the conversation we're trained to have in law school. I'm trying to have the conversation about what it truly means to have proven something beyond a reasonable doubt. Like I said, that the fact that they wouldn't give immunity, I can't get past them. Like, what is it they thought he would say which would knock us off reasonable doubt? That's a fair question. Why don't these experts all see this precisely the same way? Why is he saying it's less likely to be fentanyl? It's, you know, it's. I'm not saying ridiculous stuff. I'm only saying ridiculous stuff because this is a case that you're simply not supposed to talk this way about. If this was about Abu Jamal, nobody would look at me and they'd be saying, you're right. Those are good points.
Is it possible, Noam, the reason they didn't give him immunity is because he had nothing to say that was of interest either way, and they want to nail him?
That's for the judge to decide. The judge can decide if what he's going to say is inappropriate or prejudicial. As Douglas said in the rest of the quote, he says, the prosecution is not supposed to be the architect of how the case goes. The judge is supposed to be the architect.
But Lara just said that he died because there was not enough oxygen to his brain, and all three experts agree.
Yes, but that can be from various causes. When the heart stops, you don't get enough oxygen in the brain. But the heart might not have stopped. It's less likely that the heart stopped from fentanyl. Again, let me say, if all three had said, nope, couldn't have been the fentanyl. All right, that's good enough for me. If all three, but is it one guy saying it had nothing to do with his heart condition, one guy saying it was his heart condition, but it's also positional asphyxia, and the other one saying, no, it's the adrenaline, his heart has to pump faster because of all the stress he's under, and the heart gave out. This to me is like, well, it seems to me that nobody's really sure what happened here, but the only thing you all agree on is that if you had found this guy in his room with this amount of fentanyl, you'd all agree, yeah, it was an overdose. Like, you wouldn't be like, wait a second, something. It was enough to have been an overdose. But because it happened on the heels, and I think Baker even used the word heels, it happened on the heels of what he was going through, we put this together. Just like Sicknick died on the heels of being at that insurrection, or whatever you want to call it. These are ways that assumptions can lead to injustices. And again, but that's not the only thing. But then again, the one witness who would have perhaps, maybe not, insight into Floyd, his drug use, his tolerance, when he took the drugs, that witness was not given immunity. And I'm just saying, listen, I'm happy the guy is in jail. For a moral reason. This guy does not have any moral claim to saying, I don't belong in jail. This is a tragedy. Don't get me wrong on this. I'm just trying to be different than everyone else I seem to know who is pressured into not bringing the things up that I'm saying, which would be ordinary course of business in a law school class. If this was just a written hypothetical, everything that I'm saying I'm not brilliant. This would have come out of 2/3 of the mouths in the law school classroom. Exactly what I'm saying.
Do you think, Lara, that Tobin was being truthful when he said that even a healthy man would have died under these circumstances?
I do. I do think that.
Now,
go ahead.
Say truthful, you mean truthful or accurate?
Accurate. Do you think it was being accurate?
Look, you're talking about one of the better credentialed people, you know.
My question is that would mean that Chauvin has never done this before. He's never done that particular move before, because if he did, the person would have died. So what was so extraordinary about this situation that he did something that he never did before, and that could lead to Seaton's theory that they knew each other.
Well, I guess the other thing is he could have done it before, but just not for that long. I mean, there was something so extraordinary and excruciating about the minutes ticking by. I think it would be one thing if someone was super combative and you're afraid for your life and it's a matter of seconds or even maybe like a minute or something. But when you look at these circumstances and you look at this action, I think, Dan, probably he had never done that before, because I don't think it's survivable, or at least I think it was a substantial contributing cause as to why Mr. Floyd lost his life.
Now, Laura, I sent you those 3 studies that I found, and I think 2 of them
Yes, you did.
peer-reviewed, and I don't want to get into the studies, obviously, because I don't know anything about them, but I'm just asking you, so these studies throw cold water on the notion of positional asphyxia, and actually one of them calls it junk science, right? So my question is this: why do you think those studies didn't get introduced? That's really my question. Like, what did they just, is the lawyer so bad that he missed it?
It's really, really hard to second guess the attorneys. And I think that everything that I know about this case leads me to believe that Derek Chauvin had very competent representation. And just to be clear, you don't actually introduce studies. You don't move them into evidence. They don't come in and the jury goes back and reads them. It's that the expert that you call in their training and experience can rely on a study, and then they can talk about a study, and that becomes part of their testimony. It becomes part of the evidence that way. So I guess your question is, why didn't their experts talk about your studies?
Well, one of them did. I don't know if you know, one of them did mention one of the studies, the author, but then the defense counsel seemed to not even realize what he was talking about. Like, he didn't say, "Oh yes, I'm happy you mentioned that. Let's talk about that study." You know, it really seemed like he was oblivious. I mean, these studies, I don't know how to put them up. If you read them, you can, again, if you're concerned about justice, you certainly say to yourself, wait a second, I would like to know whether these studies are legit or not, because if these studies are legit, and some of them have been cited, or if they're not ridiculous, if they're not debunked, this is kind of a path to reasonable doubt as well. It's really, I saw those studies, I couldn't believe what I was reading. Okay, next question.
Well, wait, can I say one more thing about that before we move on? Because I do want to just talk about one of the studies that you sent to me, and it's behind a paywall, but I read the excerpts that you sent me, and even in the studies that are most supportive of your position, they still have language like
not my
this.
position, not my position, but go ahead.
Sorry, the point that you're pressing, which is there's a suggestion in the literature that positional asphyxia is junk science. The study, one of the studies that you sent me said, as found in the medical literature, positional asphyxia is a condition which does exist, but applies to circumstances where a subject cannot escape a position, where the head is flexed down and trapped, or the person's chest is compressed, causing asphyxiation due to the inability to move out of that position. So
but it also
if
gives
I were the prosecutor and the defense's expert was citing that study, that would be my question on cross-examination. You're saying this is junk science. How do you explain your own study's conclusion that says it does exist, and it exists in precisely the circumstances that we're looking at on this video, and that's probably why they didn't use it? I don't want to get them wrong, but I think that's the study that said it had to be over 220 pounds. It compared it to it's happened with soda machines falling on people's backs. It actually gives a precise weight, which of where that would be the case. But all right, and one of the studies actually says if you hear positional asphyxia, you should probably assume that excited delirium is the key variable. So this is what people are going to do, and I got to keep saying it. These are not my positions. I certainly don't have any opinion on positional asphyxia and whether it exists or not. I just know that if I was in the jury and I saw those studies, I'd want some kind of explanation, like, what's your answer to this, Dr. Tobin, Dr. whatever, because, this is reasonable doubt.
No, if you were on that jury, do you think you would have just held out and made it a hung jury?
I was going to ask that, Dan. Thank you for asking.
Well, this brings me to my next question, actually.
So what's your answer?
Well, I'm going to answer it, but I'm going to answer it in a cowardly way. So just hold on. they asked for, if this case was not appropriate for change of venue and or for sequestration, are those concepts essentially forever dead? I mean, is there any case again that will be appropriate for change of venue after this, or sequester the jury after this?
So that's an interesting question. And prior to the Tsarnaev case, I would have said that change of venue is dead. Now that's a federal case, but the Second Circuit did overturn Tsarnaev's conviction and death sentence, saying that there should have been a change of venue and that there was no way for him to get a fair trial in Boston as the Boston Marathon bomber. And it was a mistake not to move it. And I guess you're saying, well, if that's true, wouldn't it also be true in this case in Minneapolis? And I guess the problem really, as I see it, is that where on earth were you going to find 12 people who hadn't seen that video? Like, do you honestly think he would have been better off in Colorado Springs, Colorado? Billions of people watched that. Would he have been better off in London?
Well,
or
okay, so let me tell you my answer. My answer is not precise legally, or maybe it's a. I'm worried. I'm even though I went to law school, I might be speaking kind of like an amateur here, but I put them together because, first of all, yes, I think that someone in, it's not just the video, someone in Minneapolis has felt the full anger of that city, number one. Number two, they might have preconceived notions about the police force, but at the same time, the lack of sequestration, they also know that it's their city that's going to burn, that it's their friends' businesses. They also know that their names are likely to come out, and who knows what could happen to them in their city. In Colorado Springs, you might survive that. In Minneapolis, if your name's going to come out and you're the one who hung the jury on, I mean, who's got the courage to do that? So putting that all together. So the question, because getting to the answer to your question is, Dan, if I was on the jury, I don't know if I would have the courage. I think I might have been a hung jury on the murder. I think I would have voted for manslaughter. And I think I would have had sleepless nights about whether or not I would have done that if not for the tremendous moral and reasonable fear for my safety and for my city and what my peers would say. I think I might just say, okay, manslaughter. But if I was if it's an anonymous verdict, like an online thing, given what I've just said, I think I would say, no, I don't trust that prosecution for a minute. Why didn't they why didn't they give this guy immunity? Why are these experts not quite sure? Now I will tag that by saying that I'm not, Lara may be right. I may be wrong about my impression of what the experts said. Maybe they are speaking more in one voice than I got because I didn't watch it. I just going from snippets in the Times and comparing like key paragraphs, right? So maybe they are all reconcilable in some way, and maybe that would lead me to a different verdict. But based on the arguments I'm expressing here today, to whatever level of ignorance I have of the facts, all these things together, I don't feel comfortable. I feel comfortable with Chauvin in jail. I don't feel comfortable where we're going as a legal system. And, combine that with this, the ACLU today tweets, the system allowed George Floyd to be murdered remains fully intact. Moments after we celebrated a win, Columbus police, and it murdered, they say. The ACLU says Columbus police murdered a 15-year-old black girl. Now, of course, you can go on to the body cam on CNN and see that actually they shot her as she was stabbing somebody. And as Coleman Hughes tweeted, I bet you that the parents of the girl being stabbed, is not thinking that the cop murdered somebody, So this kind of, where Lara Bazelon is still on the case, but the ACLU sure ain't. And we're just slipping and sliding into a kind of discrediting of what used to be honorable, which is to have an unpopular opinion of defending the possibility that an unpopular person might not be properly convicted, even though he's probably guilty. Look how the ACLU proudly stood up for Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. Proudly, nobody gave you could stand up for a 9/11 terrorist, and you go to cocktail parties and you'll be perfectly kind of fine. But you cannot stand up and say, hey, why didn't the prosecution give immunity to this guy? You can't say that on TV. It worries me. It worries me. And I know Laura doesn't think I'm crazy. And I guess what I'm saying is that even if Laura disagrees with my end outcome on the final, but she knows what I'm saying here. This is what you're devoted your whole life to, is fighting these exact things that I'm complaining about.
It's definitely true that I have represented some extremely, extremely unpopular people. But I also just question your premise that a lot of people ever really thought that that was noble or were ever willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. Like, I feel like 12 Angry Men is a movie for a reason. It's fiction. It's this idea that you really are going to have people who are the Atticus Finches, right? And in the jury room, that same person. And that's never how our system has really operated. I
retract it. It was considered noble among the people that used to be in the ACLU and that type. It was the right that would ridicule an attorney for defending Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. It's not the right anymore. Or the right might still, in the case of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. But I'm saying among the people who would have respected that, they no longer respect it. It boggles the mind that the ACLU will call somebody a murderer without a trial. This is a total rewiring of everything that we ever knew about the ACLU. They wouldn't call Khalid Sheikh Mohammed a murderer 15 years ago. They would say, we don't know yet, you know. And what's incredible, Dan is one of the first said to me, is that this woman is stabbing somebody. It's not like, you know, there's no doubt what was going on there. And so this, I mean, it would be helpful for somebody on the left to say, at least raise these issues, even if they say, I think we got the right guy, I think we got a guilty man, but you know what? There's a lot of things about the way this trial was held that we really shouldn't be so gleeful about. We really shouldn't we shouldn't be so like casual about the fact that they did this by suppressing a witness. It's you know.
Is it possible that that person just didn't have anything useful to contribute?
That's up to the judge to decide.
Well, according to Lara, it sounds like the prosecution is the one who ultimately decides where to grant immunity. So it's not ultimately up to the judge. I mean, I know nothing about...
You are a perfect example of what I'm saying, because like I said, Seaton, and I'll let Laura answer. If this were a different case, I wouldn't be having to convince you of this. If this was a case of like I said, the Central Park 5, and I told you, well, actually there was a witness, but he was selling drugs at the time. So the prosecution is not gonna let him testify. Would you ever say, well, I suppose that's because the prosecution knows that he's got nothing worthwhile to offer. Listen to how you're bending your natural instincts in order to make this okay. It's not okay. That's all I'm saying. It's not okay what they did that. It's just not okay. Maybe legal. It's not okay. So Lara, what do you want to say?
Well, I confess that I do not know the ins and outs of Minnesota state law. I can tell you that in the Ninth Circuit, so that's the state where I live in, I think 8 other states. In federal court, there's a way for the judge to force the prosecution to grant immunity if the judge determines that the failure to grant immunity would deprive the jury of testimony that would distort the fact-finding process. So, you know, it has to be extreme. And I don't know that that was a law that was operational in the state of Minnesota. So I have no idea whether they like listen to this guy talk in camera or not. I mean, I will say, I guess I just kind of as a practical matter, don't find your argument very convincing, because like, what is he really going to say? You know, he's going to talk about the time that he spent with Mr. Floyd in the car a full 10 or 15 minutes before we saw this video. And I guess I honestly just keep coming back to the video, because I believe that the prosecution could have played the video and sat down and they would have gotten the same result as if they had had a 3-week trial, because it literally is about common sense, because you're just watching one person extinguish another person's life in real time.
It's not common sense if somebody has a lethal dose of drugs in them. It's not. It can be.
It's also not common sense because I don't know enough about neck holds. I watched the video, and the only thing I knew for sure is that Chauvin had his knee on the guy's neck or close to the guy's neck, and that George Floyd lost consciousness. But I don't have the expertise in that particular neck hold to know. I couldn't tell you that neck hold was fatal. If somebody had told me that neck hold actually doesn't cause any harm at all, I couldn't, and an expert said that, I couldn't have said you're wrong. The only reason I know that neck hold is fatal is because Tobin told me it was fatal. Otherwise, I really don't know.
But also because you watched this guy get murdered.
No, but you're saying, I watched a guy lose consciousness in front of my eyes.
And die.
But I don't know that it was, but I can't say that the neck hold is fatal hold because I'm ignorant about neck holds. Somebody I read, well, it's got to be both sides of the carotid artery to have an effect. I don't know. It looked bad, but if an expert had said, no, this neck hold is non-lethal, I would have said, oh, well, all right. I mean, I wouldn't have thought that, but sure.
So
the reason I know it's lethal is because Tobin told me it was lethal.
So we're going back and forth here, and the question is whether we're
I'm just saying, like the people that say the video tells you all you need to know, I just don't agree with that line of reasoning. I needed to know whether that neck hold was fatal or non-lethal or not, and I had to rely on Tobin and others to tell me that.
Yeah, I assumed it was lethal. That's why Seaton referred to when I first saw it. I was like, this is a Nazi, you know. The first time I realized, not happily, that there was more than meets the eye was when we saw the body camera footage where he was calling for his mother and saying he can't breathe before he was ever on the ground. It's like, okay, well, that's disturbing because now I could see how they're going to claim that they didn't believe him when he said he couldn't breathe because actually he was saying he couldn't breathe, you know, when they weren't even touching him. So it's like, oh shit, that's complicating things now, right? God damn it. And then they offered to open the window for him when he said he couldn't breathe, and it's like, oh shit, they didn't look like they were out to really, you know, manhandle him because they could have just thrown him in the back of the police car. They chose not to. He said he wanted to lay on the ground, so they laid him on the ground. Like, there was so many things like, oh shit, it's just not as clear. I wish these other facts hadn't come out, right? So I'm like, oh, well, maybe I got to keep an open mind that there's not everything that meets the eye here. It still looks really bad, but then all of a sudden now I think, well, the experts are not really saying anything. And then, well, yes, it's not likely this would have been a drug overdose, but the converse or the obverse or whatever of not likely is it's possible it was. And I don't think that's a stretch what I'm saying. As soon as I hear out of the mouth of an expert saying, no, that's not likely, what I'm hearing him not say is, no, that's not possible. And when I hear him say, it is possible, that as I understand it, is reasonable doubt as to that fact. Now you could say we don't want to believe that expert, we don't believe the other two. The jury's free to do that, right? I don't know. But let's not pretend there wasn't an expert there who said something which, if that was all that was said, it's the prosecution's expert, you know, and so that the reason, so that what could the guy in the car say? The guy, as I said, the guy in the car could say he was totally laid out, just basically passed out. And he rose to the occasion because he was under stress. He could say, I never saw him take that much drugs before in his life. That's the most I ever saw him take. That might go to the idea of tolerance. He could say he took it, you know, exactly the time that he took it. I mean, I guess they could probably figure that out by going backwards by how much was in his blood, or maybe not. I don't even know how it works. I don't know what he could say, but all I know is they didn't want to let him testify. And I don't think it was illegal in the Minnesota law. I think the Ninth Circuit is the only one that does that. But I do know that I have a problem with that sort of thing. I always have. I always thought that prosecutors that withhold evidence should go to jail. I told our friend Flom that on our podcast, and he told me about this concept of prosecutorial immunity. I didn't even know about it, and I couldn't process it. And I had to go and look it up. I said, how can a prosecutor who keeps out evidence not go to jail? Like, they should go to a special place in hell for that. And if you have a witness, I think the assumption should be that if you're on trial, unless there's a really overpowering, compelling reason, you should be able to bring in any evidence you want to show your innocence. That's what I think.
But as you know, that's not the way the law works. And there's a big distinction between manipulating a law that works in your favor, which is what you can do as a prosecutor by deciding not to give somebody immunity, and hiding exculpatory evidence, which is against the law, deprives people of their freedom, and you're right, is completely maddening because they have absolute immunity. People are talking all day long about qualified immunity and how terrible qualified immunity is. At least you can leap over qualified immunity. It's hard, but you can. You can do zero civilly against a prosecutor, no matter how horribly they behave at trial. And that, to me, is maddening. It's absolutely maddening because it reinforces the worst kind of behavior with no consequence. But we're talking about two different kinds of behavior.
But I see them as the same morally, and I see that. In other words, if this prosecution knew one fact that might have been important to the jury, and they used their legal position to keep that fact out, morally, they are no longer on the side of justice. Now they are no different than the prosecutor who withholds exculpatory evidence. It's just, there's no law against it. The law's on their side.
Can we talk?
Can I say something? I haven't been here in 15 minutes.
Yes,
Can I say that every court has ever worked like that since the beginning of courts? So, I mean, like, I feel like you have a problem with the judicial system, which
Yeah,
I agree.
I do.
I agree. I hate the whole system.
This is why our first fundraiser was for the Innocence Project, right, Periel? The first one we wanted to do anyway. This is something I take very, very seriously, and the very thought pattern which I've always taken seriously, I'm somehow now being forced to put out of my mind as I see similar issues in this trial, under tremendous pressure to do that, and I'm having trouble with that because there are sequestration, change of venue, keeping out witnesses, causation. There are real issues here to me, and I just, but I'm happy he's in jail. I don't think a nice person got off here. And like I said, he thought he was killing him. He had no reason to think he wasn't killing him. I get that, but the law is,
Who is in charge of sentencing? Is it the same judge at trial that judge for the sentencing? Do anybody have an inkling?
Yeah, you have to talk, Laura, because there's some people who are just listening. She's nodding yes.
Yes, it's the same judge, and he is going to go through a very sort of set analysis where they're going to file this memo in a couple of weeks called a Blakely memo, where the prosecution lists factors that they're going to say are aggravating and mean that the judge should go up from what the standard guidelines say. And then the defense obviously is going to argue for leniency. They're going to talk about Officer Chauvin's lack of a criminal record and other kinds of background information. And then the judge is going to decide. I think the guidelines, the way they are, the max for the top count is 40 years, but it looks like under the guidelines, he's looking at 11 or 12 if the judge hands down the kind of traditional guideline sentence, but he could go up or he could go down.
If it's 11, he can be out in 7, say?
I don't know how much good time you get, but that might be right.
Do you think that will provoke the worst possible reaction if he gets 11 years? Do you think we're looking at riots or something resembling that? I mean, I know that's not necessarily your field, but do you have an inkling?
That's an interesting question. I mean, so the best analogy I can give you is, do you remember the Brock Turner sexual assault case that happened at Stanford, the swimmer? Right. And do you remember that the prosecution asked for 6 years at the sentencing and the judge gave Brock Turner 6 months? Yeah. And then there was a campaign to recall that judge from office, and it succeeded. He was recalled for that single sentencing decision, which I personally disagree with. I do not like the idea that we're interfering with judicial independence and mobilizing a mob to throw people out of jobs that they have because we trust them to make certain decisions, whether or not we agree with them. But it goes to your point, is there a risk that there could be tremendous backlash if there's a consensus that Officer Chauvin did not get enough time? I think, yes, there probably is a risk of that. And that makes me uncomfortable. I think I'm just not a carceralist. Like, I don't believe that anybody should be getting effective life sentences. Really, almost anybody. And it makes me uncomfortable, this idea that we demonize and hate certain people so much that we want their heads cut off. We want them electrocuted. We want them locked away for the rest of their lives. And if judges aren't punitive enough, they're going to have to pay some kind of price for it. And I think, honestly, that's such a dangerous precedent. And it should not be a progressive value. It should not be a progressive value, because the only people who end up getting fucked over by that, excuse my language, are people of color, because they're the vast majority of people that end up getting sentenced. And so
Thank you.
I just don't, it makes me deeply uncomfortable when people are screaming and yelling for blood.
So I agree with you. I am totally against the death sentence. I think the judicial system is totally fucked up.
But she doesn't mean just a death sentence. She means life sentences in prison. Yeah.
Right. I agree with that also, because I think that the system is racist and fucked up beyond measure. But I also really, really don't understand how, and even with this, you know, what just happened with Ma'Khia Bryant, you know, people are saying, oh, well, she was stabbing somebody. And it's like, yeah, she was, but she's also a child. And aren't police supposed to fucking de-escalate situations?
How do you de-escalate a stabbing?
I don't know. I'm not a cop. I have no idea.
So you know,
If that person was white, they would figure it
you
out.
can watch a video and know for sure what, you know, exactly the causation of.
Oh, you just
but you can,
do that.
but you can't look at someone being stabbed and realize that it requires instant stopping or someone's gonna get killed.
That's not what I said. That's not what I said.
You can't de-escalate a stabbing. Come on now.
I think you can, actually. I think there are ways that they say, I'm not saying that I can do it. I'm saying that they argue they can. I'm saying there's videos of white people doing it. No, there's so many videos of white people being stopped with knives. I can send you them right now on Instagram. It is a campaign right now. I don't know if it's a conspiracy, but they're shitting out a shitload of videos right now. White people just getting off of being crazy. I always believe in conspiracies of like, you know how the media, social media makes you think crazy shit? I see black people being shot and white people being off on my feed. And I know you're seeing something different on your feed. That's all I'm saying.
And if somebody was stabbing your daughter and the cops were there, and they could stop the next stab with a shot.
I don't think they had yet stabbed her. I think she was going for her first stab.
First stab. Of course you want, have we gone so far from?
I'm going to say, no, I don't want people shooting.
Hold
no,
on.
I don't want.
The cause used to be unarmed, undangerous, sometimes innocent. In other words, like really minding their own business, black people being harassed, beaten up, and shot by the cops. Have we morphed this into the fact that somebody caught in the act of stabbing somebody is the same issue? This is not the same issue.
Yes, it is. I'm saying it's the same issue. I said at the beginning of the story that we have a bigger issue of violence in this country that is not race. It's not based on women. It's not based on terrorism. It's based on a psychotic level of we need to kill people. Like, you listen to cops, they always say, I mean, we gave him a chance. And it'd be like the Atlanta shooting. Remember the drunk Atlanta dude? He was for an hour. He was trying to leave, and they wouldn't let him leave. And they tried, and then he got shot when they grabbed their taser. They shot the fuck out of him. So yes, I'm saying that this is a violent problem that's bigger than what you're saying. Yeah, that's my point.
I'm astounded that you would think that somebody stabbing somebody deserves the same consideration as an innocent person. You know, I'm
saying that because you look at everybody as evil, you make an evil decision.
I'm saying
that the cops need to stop looking at everybody as evil. That way they can actually distinguish it. Because I'm saying the cops look at everybody like that stabbing woman. They look at me like that when I have nothing in my hand, and they'll shoot at me because I have the guns in my head.
Yeah,
I'm saying that policy needs to end.
Yeah, that's the problem. But that's not. I agree with you on that, actually. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the person who was stabbing somebody. That is evil.
What I'm asking is there no other way that police officers are trained to de-escalate that situation?
Well, they can tase.
So why did they tase her? Why did they shoot her 4 times? She was 15 years old.
Because tasing is not as certain to save the other woman's life.
I do wonder what an English cop is trained to do under those circumstances, because they don't have.
It doesn't happen very often in England.
It does. There's videos of that happening, though. I don't know how often. I mean, actually, that's an obscure statement that I'm not going to actually argue yes or no to. I wish somebody would Google violent deaths in England right now.
A slight amount of violent crime compared to us in England.
Lara, can you weigh in that?
We're number 3 in the world, though, Noam. We're number 3 next to Afghanistan.
I don't think they needed to unload 4 bullets into a 16 or 17-year-old girl. I don't. I mean, I'd like to believe that there was something short of him doing that would have de-escalated that situation. I'm not a cop either. She hadn't yet used the knife, and you really just have to wonder if that amount of force was actually appropriate and that her life needed to be taken that way. It seemed, it was just shocking to watch. And I understand it's not the same situation. Every single one of these situations is different. But to go back to the original point about Seaton's point about just the problem that we have where cops look at everybody and they see a monster kind of dictates, I think, everything that comes next. And of course, we know some people seem more monstrous to cops than other people. And by that, I mean, when they look at Black people, they see criminals and they see threats.
Right. The point of the whole cops are just to be like oppress people. That's the whole point. And then like we get scared and we go, we need to, like if you look at like the 80s, we have those 80 movies of just cops going like just going against the law. We as a country, we just needed them to go crazy. And I'm just like, we need to stop looking at our cops as enforcers. They're not enforcers. They're I mean, we're also enforcers, mental health workers, drug counselors. There's that argument.
Okay, it says they're not sure how many times she's shot. I think that if that was my daughter, if that was my daughter about to be stabbed, I would be hugging that policeman now. I would not be. I mean, listen, if there was some other way, and it's sure to have saved the life of the person who's about to be stabbed, then I would have to agree with you. It has to be sure. Otherwise, we're going to have to err on the side of saving the life rather than saving the life of the person who is stabbing. I don't know if they know that she's 16 at the time that she's stabbing it. I don't know that. But I think that, I think we do have to be careful here because, as we know, murders are going up as cops are less and less
supported.
As cops are going to become more and more cautious. I mean, imagine if this girl was stabbed and died. What would we say about that? Would we blame the cop?
That would be horrible.
I don't think it would make the paper.
But
What's that?
Also, I think it's worth noting that if I'm not mistaken, she called the cops for help and wound up getting killed.
What can the cop do about that?
But she asked for help. She was asking.
I don't know if it's true or it's not true. At the point where somebody takes a knife and is trying to plunge it into another person, at that point, we've always assumed that was when the cop was justified to shoot. Now we're talking about a totally new world where even where somebody might be about to kill somebody, we're not sure the cop should take all action to save the life.
I don't know.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay, that's up to our legislators, I guess.
I mean, I'm not comfortable living in a country where it's okay for cops to kill kids. I mean, I'm just not. Like, I think, I don't know how they could be trained differently, but there has to be a better solution or a better way to handle it.
Well, I mean, at some point, if you want to be realistic, I don't know what the law of diminishing returns is on how low, with all proper reforms, how low we can get the number of killings that shouldn't have happened down. It can never be zero.
We can't in a vacuum because the cops are a part of the gun system.
No, I'm making a point. I'm making a point about the law of diminishing returns, meaning that it gets we have 18 Black people killed unarmed last year, I think. So you want to get it down to 10, but to get it from down to 10 to 5, like it gets harder and harder and harder and harder and takes more and more. But one thing is for sure, there is the other side of this problem, is that when you have a culture, and this goes to what you're saying, Seaton, about guns and all that, when you have a culture like Chicago, I don't want to bring this up in the wrong way, but just as an example, where you have this tremendous amount of gun violence, knife violence, tremendous number of kids being shot every weekend, young kids. The Times did a whole story about all the teenagers shot dead in the violence there over the course of the year. When you have that going on, it's not reasonable to think that there's going to be interactions with the cops where the cops are going to kill somebody. That's going to happen. So we're going to have to put some attention also to the social problem.
This is not, again, I'm going to go bigger. This is not about the Black people in the ghetto shooting themselves. This is a bigger issue of the entire government that there were 40 mass shootings in 3 months. I don't think this is, again, this is, looking at this issue as secular to me, I think it's like going in circles because nothing's going to be solved.
But it's both, Seaton. But it's both, Seaton, because in the Black community, they have a 12 times greater rate of being killed by white people generally kill white people, Black people generally kill Black people, right?
Yes, that is a thing.
But a Black person has a 12 times higher chance of being killed in his community than the average white person does.
But that's just a reflection of our whole entire community. We have a reason to have we have a higher unemployment. We also have higher diabetes. We also make great music. We always are front runners of all the things and culturally. That's just how we are. I said
it's the social problem. I said we have to address the social. I think we're on the same side here. What I'm saying is that we're also going to have to find a way to fix all the things. I mean, they're all one bouquet. What you're discussing. It's not just the shootings, the poverty, all of it. I'm going to stipulate to all of everything you're saying. But that problem as a whole also drives this greater problem because there's tremendous violence going on in our inner cities, and when you have people stabbing each other. Last week, there was a 13-year-old got shot right before he threw the gun. I don't think he was Black. I think he was Hispanic. But I was like, 13-year-olds are in gun culture, right? Like that is such a national shame for us. 13-year-olds carrying guns.
How old was the kid? How old was the Rittenhouse kid? Was he only 16?
He was 17, I think.
I think he was 19.
Was he 19? Okay.
I thought so. Let me double check. I can Google that.
The Columbine boys were 16. So, all right, I'm just probably mixing them all up.
Hold on a sec. Yeah, I don't want to tell you the wrong thing.
I think
this is a side note. It's a side note kind of issue. I just bring it up, but I don't know. I agree with you. Again, it's a social issue, but just I'm only bringing this point up is because there's a tendency to be a whataboutism. But like, well, they're murdering them, but what about them murdering them? And I'm saying like, this is bigger than the two groups of people. This is like you go to any neighborhood and any group of people in this country, there are motherfuckers murdering people for crazy reasons. So much murder in this country over crazy shit.
I need to correct myself. When I said 19, he was 17. Now he's 18, but he was 17 at the time. Okay. Sorry.
So see, now I want to say, I think you're right. There is a tendency there's a bad faith whataboutism that people on the right will do when you want to call attention to this problem. They'll say, oh, well, if you really care about Black lives, why don't you care about what goes on in Chicago? That is not, I think, that's not what I'm doing. But there is also circling the wagons around an issue where say, well, anybody who wants to talk about the problem is guilty about whataboutism. And I don't buy that either. There really is a problem. We really do have a tremendous number of kids being shot in Chicago. It is or in cities. These are our children. Whole country. Hold on. These are our children, Black, white, and I've said this before. And the fact is, nobody really speaks for them, and that's a tragedy. Like it's nobody's cause. Tomorrow, a bunch of we said this in the podcast. Tomorrow, a bunch of Black children will die in Chicago, and whose cause is that? Who is devoting their life?
There's a bunch of marches on that. There's plenty of marches and causes. But I'm saying, like,
who is out there trying to prevent this in a short-term way? In a long-term way, say we need to have better schools. These are all things we can do today and maybe see the results.
I think there are organizations.
But the fact is, unfortunately, the only way to save those lives tomorrow is the cops, right?
No. Yes. Here's the thing. Can we go back to the main history of America? The history of America. You keep saying, everybody keeps bringing up Chicago like it's an anomaly. It is not an anomaly. Let's talk about the biggest massacre that ever happened in this country, the Hatfields and the McCoys, which was a fucking microcosm of what's happened all in Kentucky and Appalachian Mountains for 100 years. They were killing each other mercilessly for 100 years. They would have killed more people. They just want more people around. This is a tendency, again, of the main ingredient of our genes of our culture. We are some murdering motherfuckers, and it has nothing to do with Chicago. It has nothing to do with the cops. They're just involved in the mess. The fact that we just have 400 million guns in this country.
Okay. But that's the main problem. But there are bad neighborhoods, and there are neighborhoods that don't have shootings.
But where? What neighborhood does not have shootings? The people aren't there, but the people have guns everywhere. And if they aren't, they're not reported, but they're okay. I'm sorry. I'm going on conjecture because it's not reported, and I'm not going to go that far. But
I don't
to say this country is not violent
I don't
is an
actually
absurd statement.
I'm saying that we need cops. That's really all I'm saying. We need cops to save lives in the short term. This body cam video, and then maybe the cop should have tasered, or whatever it is, but it appears to be a life. Because likely that's a life being saved while a life is being killed. But we do need cops, and these are difficult issues. I don't know. I don't even know what I'm saying.
Cops aren't trained properly, okay? Cops are not trained properly. They're not trained to deal with the things that they're dealing with, and so they're killing people that they shouldn't be killing. And they're violent, and some of them are fucking sociopaths, and some of them are probably trying to do a decent job, but the system is really, really fucked.
Yeah, I don't know. They're not killing that many people actually, but they are. I think they're abusive to people. I'm always said that's the.
I mean, anybody who is killed, like, they shouldn't be killing people. There are other ways to de-escalate situations.
Okay, but you see what we're going out. But we're complaining about them when they, as we should, when they kill George Floyd. And then we're in the same conversation complaining about them when they kill someone who was about to stab another person. And I'm just saying that
I'm complaining about both.
That is probably not a careful conversation you're having. That's all. If I was a cop, I'd be like, really? Now all of a sudden, the person who saved this person's life is Derek Chauvin? That's what you think of us? I'm out. I could just see that reaction for a cop.
I mean, the history of the cops are not good. I mean, I think the cops could have avoided all of this shit if they actually had better public relations the last 10 years and actually admitted that they had a problem. Instead, they had to let the country fucking have a fucking riot until they went, oh, maybe we'll do some paperwork. So I mean, they could have avoided all this shit. But again, every institution in this country has some bullshit about them. It's just the cops murder people.
When you give people who like the idea of being cops, if you want good cops, you should not let anybody be a cop who wants to be a cop. If you know what I mean. Like, who wants to be a cop? Someone who has probably a bad reason to do it. And you definitely don't want to give people guns and badges because you know what hall monitors become when you give them power. So you're dealing with some very dark currents of human nature. That's why I'm saying the law of diminishing returns. Like, there's no magic training or whatever it is. You're going to have a certain number of cops who will always do horrible things. That's, I don't know at what number we say this is as good as it's going to get. What's that?
Because you're saying that's the nature of the kind of person who wants to become a police officer.
And human nature. And
it's also the fact that we need a certain number of cops, and and there simply aren't enough people. There aren't enough superhumans to do a job that requires basically being a superhuman. The job description for a cop is basically unfillable. You need to be a lawyer, a psychiatrist, a soldier, I mean, it can't be done.
So we gotta wrap it up.
Noam has the intellectual ability to be a cop, but not perhaps the physical ability to do it. People have the physical ability to do it, but not the intellectual ability to do it. Nobody's qualified for that job.
What do I have?
I want to wrap it up, and I want to get everybody the last word on it. I want to say what, as I'm talking about this, I'm trying to really in my own mind even say, what do I really think about this George Floyd thing? So I would say this, that really what bothers me most of all is that segment of our intellectual spectrum that normally would speak out about issues, regardless of who was on trial, seems to have disappeared. And because of that, there's something that bothers me. I don't know if I was in the courtroom. I didn't watch the whole thing. Maybe I would have voted to second-degree murder. I don't know. I just the dearth of conversation about the very issues that I brought up. I don't even know if I'm right about these issues. I'm like, all I know is that the reason I'm not hearing any of these things talked about is because of a really bad intellectual peer pressure that's going on right now, where people who would normally really want to be talking about such things have gone silent. That makes me nervous. What's that?
Like, well, the mere fact that I mentioned the possibility that the hold wasn't wasn't a lethal hold, and it turned out to have been one, at least according to the experts. But even bringing that up, I would be hesitant in a social setting. Like, hey, I don't know much about holds. Was that really lethal? Even to say that, I would have been uncomfortable saying it. So, I mean, I agree with you there that conversations people don't even want to have, it should be.
You know what? I'm going to agree with your instincts, Dan. That was a good question not to bring up. That was solid. You don't want to bring that up around people. I agree. Yeah. It's because, yeah. All right.
Okay.
Yeah, but you
definitely shouldn't. That's a very uncomfortable
There was a
question.
time when people who said the Central Park joggers were innocent, where Donald Trump wrote, horrible editorials about it, how, and shame people out of that position. Like, listen, we should all be people of principle. Like, the country will be much better off sticking to principle. And
Everybody was like,
principle is all we have.
Spoken in a while.
What'd you say? What'd you say, Periel? All right, Lara, what give us wisdom? You're the expert.
Okay, so
and then bid adieu because we've been on an hour
well,
40 minutes.
Go ahead. Go.
that was downstairs.
Okay, well, why don't we end with Seaton's? Well, Lara, if you have anything to say, please do so at this time.
Yeah, give us a nice summation. Take your time too.
this makes me uncomfortable to say because I never root for the prosecution. I'm a former federal public defender, and in my heart, I'll always be a public defender. And in the job I have now, even though I'm a law professor, I still represent people up against the power of the state. So it makes me uncomfortable. But I guess my feeling about the Floyd case is that if that isn't overwhelming evidence of guilt under those statutes, I don't know what is. And if you can't convict in that case, no officer could be convicted ever.
Will you grant me that the issues that I raised are intellectually honest issues?
I grant that you fervently believe in the issues that you've raised. None of the issues that you've raised have moved me off of my position or made me think there was a reasonable doubt.
Right. Okay.
Reasonable doubt's, of course, a fuzzy term anyway. And I'm not even convinced that juries really have a handle on what it is. If you can even define it.
Sure.
Let me ask you one question, Laura. What if this were to have occurred in the trial? Would this be? What if they asked him? Because I think the defense guy was cowardly. What if he said to the doctor, "Are you sure he didn't die of a fentanyl overdose?" And what if the doctor had said no? Would that be reasonable doubt?
Okay, so your question is, are you sure he died? Are you sure
sorry,
he died?
are you sure he did not die of a fentanyl overdose? And the doctor said, "No, I'm not."
Can you rule out a fentanyl overdose as the exclusive cause of death? And the doctor said, I can't rule it out as the exclusive cause of death. Exclusive?
Well,
that might be reasonable doubt, but I don't think a doctor would say that, right? Any doctor, I don't care who it is. I mean, unless it's Donald Trump's doctor, when you put him up there, is going to talk about multiple causatory factors. And then
let me rephrase the question.
That was one. Right?
I'll rephrase the question.
You're kind of asking me a hypothetical that would call for completely different facts, I think.
I'll rephrase the question. What if the question was, doctor, are you sure he wouldn't have died anyway just as an overdose?
I think if I was a doctor, okay, let's pretend that I'm answering this question. If I was a competent, respectable doctor and you asked me that question, I would say that the chances that he would have died that day in that way exclusively or almost entirely because of drugs is vanishingly small. That's what I would say. Because it's like the biggest coincidence in the world to be like, okay, George Floyd had a bad heart and he had fentanyl in his system, and oh my gosh, he happened to die at the moment that this officer was extinguishing his ability to breathe for 9 minutes, and we can take that out completely.
Okay, doctor.
And say that he just would have died anyway. To me, I can't make sense of that as an argument.
Let's play this. I'll continue to play the lawyer. Okay, doctor, are you saying that dying with a 3 times lethal dose of fentanyl in your system would be a coincidence?
What I'm saying is, it is a coincidence beyond belief that somebody with that amount of fentanyl, with the tolerance that we've talked about, with the conditions that we talked about, just so happened to die after an officer pressed his knee on his neck for 9 minutes and limited his oxygen flow, and you're asking me to say that that was not a contributing factor.
Well, okay. So when you say the tolerance, that's actually one of the issues. I say if they could prove to me that he had the tolerance, but they didn't go into that. Like, how do they? Like, it seemed to me.
Body weight wise, he had an NBA body. He was a big dude.
Yeah. So that's why the guy in the car bothered me, because I thought the guy in the car might have been able to shed some light on his tolerance.
But he's not a doctor either, right? Like, he could say maybe how much he saw him take, but he still couldn't talk about like the metabolizing effects that his body would have. You know, I mean, you know, when you use substances regularly, your body builds up a tolerance, right? Like,
tell him he could have told us perhaps, yeah, I give him that same amount every week. He takes it every week. And then I say, oh, well, yeah, that's evidence of a tolerance. That's what I'm saying. Like, they left that out. But if you say, well, but it also could have been the most he ever took. You know, we don't know what his tolerance is. We're working backwards to say, well, he had 11 nanograms. We don't want to say it killed him, so he must have had a tolerance.
Can the doctor analyze tolerance post-mortem?
No, there isn't. But they could analyze tolerance by proving that he was taking these high amounts regularly.
Lara, if I, as a legal matter, and I went to law school too, but I forgot this. If I tried to kill Periel, I shoot her, but at the same time, she has the audacity to have a heart attack and die just before the bullet hits her. Would that be attempted murder?
Yes.
That's attempted murder.
By the way,
if it's very clear that she was dead at the time that you shot her, if you shoot a dead body intending to kill, it's attempted murder. So she would have to be dead.
So Chauvin, you could theoretically, you could say it was attempted murder if you found he had intent, but Floyd died of fentanyl, but Chauvin intended to kill him, which was not established, by the way. But
if he was, this is the only way your hypothetical would work, Dan, I think, which is that he did what he did and Floyd was already a corpse. And then at that point, when he was a lifeless body, he put his knee on his neck. Then it's attempted.
By the way, I don't even understand the substantial factor test. Like, okay, let's go. Dan made his point. So if I pull a gun on you and you get scared and run into the street and get hit by a car, that's I caused the death, right?
Yes.
Now, if I pull a gun on you and you have a heart attack, was that substantial? Now that's.
Well, if there's evidence that you, like, I wasn't in the middle of having one and you pulled out a gun. You pulled out a gun, you scared me so much that I had a heart attack and dropped dead. Yes, you bear responsibility for my death.
I pull a gun on you and the person next to you gets scared and has a heart attack.
Jesus Christ, what is this?
I mean, what does substantial factor mean?
What shit game are you trying to play here?
I know, but listen, I think you're like, if you take out physical assault, I think it's not a very good parallel. Physical assault has to actually be in it. So it's mostly saying if I punch you in the face and you have a heart attack, then, am I liable for that? But I mean, yeah, I think you are.
Okay.
Anyway,
I guess you are, and that's felony murder, and I believe that was one of the charges that Chauvin was convicted of.
Oh.
That's correct. The top charge was felony murder.
If I hit a dude on the street and his head hits the ground and he dies, I'm going to jail, right? So
under felony murder, you are. Yes.
If I had been the defense attorney, I would have gone for broke on that causation issue, and I would have asked. They say, I guess maybe this is a cliche, not to ask questions unless you know the answer, which is why I think they didn't ask tougher questions. But I would have gone for broke, realizing this was my only hope, and I would have just said, well, how do you know? Are you telling me that you can tell me that someone with a lethal dose of fentanyl couldn't have died? Okay, doctor, well, when does somebody die of an overdose in relationship to when they take the drugs? The next day? Don't they take it when they have a maximum level of the drug in their system? Isn't that when they die? Isn't that what George Floyd was at right then? The maximum level of the drug in his system? How can you tell me that? That's what I would say.
But you
maybe you have a good answer.
I gotta go back to this detail because you can't let go. This is fentanyl conversation. He had the maximum
that's all
amount or he had a high amount? What's the word?
3 times. I read it. He had 3 times the lethal dosage, so much so that the medical examiner said that if he had found him in his room that way, they would have assumed it was an overdose.
I don't think there's a lethal dose per se, as I understand it. The lethality of fentanyl.
They've known of people dying at 3 times less.
It's sort of like blood alcohol,
okay,
right?
so
Like a blood alcohol that would kill me isn't necessarily a blood alcohol that would kill you. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Yeah, but
yes,
he didn't say.
how far he was to go.
No, because he didn't say this is not a dose that would have killed a man that big. He could have said that. That would have been good enough for me. If he had said that, then that would have been my answer. Well, actually, the doctor testified a man 225 pounds, whatever, wouldn't die from 11 now. He didn't say that. He says, not likely. I mean, he didn't say the things. There are answers to everything I'm saying, and they're not outlandish. This would not be enough to kill. This would not be enough to kill a man that size. Okay, I'm satisfied. Tell me. I didn't say that.
Can we end with just a brief summary, Seaton, of your experience? You just literally got off stage. This is a huge day in American history. Did you bring it up?
Did I bring it up on stage?
Yes.
I brought it up a little bit, but you know, they get very scared here on weekends or on the weekdays. They're very scared people. So no, I brushed on it. I actually have no jokes on this shit. I gotta stop talking about it. This shit caused me too much anxiety. I had too many cops pull me over. My hands started shaking, so I can't even do jokes on this shit no more. I'm gonna get killed.
I have to confess, you know, I get pulled over by cops. I couldn't be more relaxed. I have to be honest. I got pulled over. I got pulled over upstate after a show, doing a show for prom kids, upstate New York. I ran a stop sign. I said, you know, officer, I was helping the kids out. You know, the kids that we don't want these kids out drinking. So we did a show for them, a comedy show, because we don't want the kids to, you know, these are beautiful children. We don't want them out risking their lives. The cop said, you go, just be careful next time.
Sweet. That is so sweet. When I was 4 years old, the cops did a drug bust in the wrong house. Happened to be my brother's grandma's house, and I was there. So I got to get my first shotgun, or it wasn't a shotgun. I think it was an assault rifle in my face. I was 4. I don't remember the make and model. So anyways, love cops.
Yeah, America just loves their beautiful children, don't they? All of them.
So I'll always bring up the children when you're getting pulled over by the cops, if it fits the scenario, you know, which it did in my case.
Okay, anyway, Laura, as I said,
we don't want them drinking on prom night, God forbid. So we did a show for them. We did a PG-rated comedy show. It was a little bit, a couple of risque, but mostly clean. And I was entertaining the kids. They're wonderful kids, by the way. Does your kid go to that school? Anyway, sorry about the stop sign. He said, you don't worry about the stop sign.
Thanks for letting me come here, Noam. I appreciate it.
You just described driving while white.
Laura, by the way, I suggested to our friend Yasha that he asked you to write an article on something. I don't know if he did. One of this is another issue for another podcast, which is also outrageous to me, that judges can use facts not proven in sentencing.
They can, no, it's worse than that, Noam. They can use acquitted conduct at sentencing, acquitted conduct.
Damn.
So there was just something in the news, and my 58-year-old brain is not processing. I'll send it to you. And Yasha sent it to me, and I knew about this, and I was able to explain, well, you know, I think I know what's going on here. And I looked it up, and it was what was going on, and he couldn't comprehend it. He's like, he couldn't process it. This is allowable. I can't process it either.
It's crazy. There's a United States Supreme Court case that says if you've been convicted of certain things and acquitted of other things, your acquitted conduct can come in at sentencing and be used to enhance your sentence, because the burden of proof is less at a sentencing. And the judge can
Didn't that happen in OJ? Didn't this happen with the OJ civil trial?
No, so OJ took a big walk, and then he got sued civilly and was found liable under clear and convincing evidence in civil court.
No,
Are you
I'm talking about
the
the other one. I'm talking about when he stole the trophies.
Right.
The trophy shit was the murder trial.
Sorry. Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
Very good, Seaton.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Sorry, you're absolutely right.
Very good.
Yeah.
I forgot that I think it's, for some reason, it's because I'm listening to this podcast about the murder, and so like that's what's fixed in my mind, and I forget that he was convicted of the robbery. My bad.
Seaton, where can
Well,
everybody
they didn't.
see your special?
See it on EPIX, on EPIX channel. Their EPIX is getting better with good shows. Check me out. Amazing.
Can we stream it? Can we stream gently down the street?
Yes, it's on Amazon. Go on Amazon Prime and then go to EPIX channel. And it's called, the show's, it's Unprotected Sets. So I'm episode 12. I have a whole thing. So yeah, come watch.
And for
this
the
is
listeners,
Lara's coming book that's coming out.
It's called A Good Mother.
Wow, beautiful.
can we have you on again to talk about the book?
Oh my God, happily. And you should read it. Pretend that you're on a plane going somewhere. It's the kind of book that you buy in an airport before you get on a plane. LOL that it's coming out now, but that's the whole idea. You should be able to read it on the plane. Going somewhere nice.
I'm going to read it.
French. Will it be available in French? Well,
It will be available in stores May 11th, maybe even in some non-shuttered airport, but you can pre-order it pretty much anywhere, and I'll happily I'll have the publisher send you an advanced reader copy. It got really good reviews from Publishers Weekly and Kirkus and Booklist. Pretty nice reviews.
I haven't read Dan's book yet either, but I'm going to read both of them. Dan hasn't.
Oh, Dan, we should trade books.
Send in your book, Dan.
I have a new version of it. I'll send you.
Send it to me. I'll send it to Laura.
Yeah, I'll send Periel my address so we can trade books.
He has an E.
Okay, so I think we're done. I do need a drink because this has been a trying week for all of us here in the United States, and I could use a caffeine.
Can I tell the listeners just about me in case you wonder?
Wait, is this another one of Noam's famous walkbacks?
No. Because I'm always worried that I get. So what I understand, it's just my nature to be contrarian and to test everything, especially when it's handed down to me as something. Well, this is what you're supposed to believe. It's just my nature. I'm happy for America that this man is in jail, and I'm even more happy that this seems to be coming to an end. This kind of total freedom of cops.
Do you believe? I saw a meme today. I saw a meme today that showed Colin Kaepernick on his knee, and next to it was a picture of Chauvin in handcuffs, and it said, "If it weren't for this, we wouldn't have this." Do you agree? Is Colin Kaepernick the reason or a substantial reason why Chauvin is in jail or convicted?
No, I don't think that's the reason, but I think that he's evidence of the entire trend in that direction. I don't think he's causal to it, but he helped shepherd it along. But I think that video was the reason.
I don't think Chauvin would have been convicted if they didn't have like the threat of protest. Personally, I think the threat of like another Black Lives Matter like massive scale was like a big pressure in it. I'm not saying it was the only thing, but it seems to be the only way we can prosecute cops is with like a repercussion on the city. That seems to be the main pattern of every conviction.
Well, there risky because there may come a day when a cop actually doesn't deserve to be prosecuted, and they're afraid to let him off because of the mob. That's dangerous.
Well, yeah, I mean that's kind of what the opposite situation of, since you're not asking Black people before they shoot them, this is going to be a balance kind of thing.
Yeah, but you make that argument a lot, and I understand the argument, but I always want to push back and say that it's not fair to punish innocents for the terrible things that have gone on that they were not involved in. You cannot sacrifice a person of any color to something that's unfair to him because terribly unfair things happen to other people in the past. Well, my question is how would society function otherwise? Because that's how we do it, everything and everybody. Well, okay, but you know that means that in some way, if somebody did something terrible to me, you would say, well, he was white.
Well, I mean, if I was going to be on that level of planning conversation,
that's what you're expressing.
My statement isn't a sweeping statement of, well, they deserve it because
that's what you're expressing, just not for somebody you know.
That was not my expression at all. My expression was that there needs to be a reconciliation, reform. There needs to be reform to this policy and a reform to this whole system, and that reform is going to be these things going to happen. Innocent people are going to be fucked up in the reform of things.
Right.
And that's because if you keep the system going, a shitload more innocent people are being killed. So really it's a question of how many innocent people you want to get killed, 0 or 100. Because that's kind of what's happening. That's a choice. It ain't like we can all just save everybody. That ain't a choice.
Bombing Hiroshima during the war, and we say, well, we sacrificed innocents for perhaps to save. I mean, it's a cold, awful calculus that we only generally accept in wartime. Seaton is saying maybe we should accept it in peacetime.
We cannot accept that in our justice system. That's the way to the end of America. You cannot accept that. That's what they had in the Old South, isn't it? Come on.
What? I mean, you're saying we can't have it. You know, we dictated
to the, I'm not comparing it to we're talking hypothetically. I'm just saying, like, we should be wary of the fact that juries might start handing down verdicts because they feel pressured from outside. That we've had.
My argument, Noam, is that to believe that something else is happening is a naive statement, since every other trial is run by that. That's my argument.
I don't know that that's the case.
Lord knows the jury system is perfect. If only we could find a better system than those juries, which obviously is.
It's a good system.
As they said,
This is not about.
It's like what they say about democracy. It's the worst system except for all the other ones. If only we could have it enlightened, like a King Solomon.
Let me say, can I say a statement that actually may be really offensive, and I don't want to lose black people here, because there's a big contingency from right when slavery ended, 1865 to about 1912. There was about I don't know, 400,000, some absurd amount of lynchings, right? What's up?
Okay, go ahead.
There was a shitload of lynchings. That was a thing for 100 years lynching. My point being is that if you look at the numbers of how many black people got lynched, if you actually compare it to how many white people got lynched, the numbers are very comparable, which again goes back to my point of, like, yes, as a black man, I'm scared of Southern white guys going around lynching up black people, but they were lynching everybody. And I'm saying our country is violent and crazy, and none of these solutions we have to fix one department, like we fix the police, that ain't gonna solve the problem. We fix black people, that ain't gonna solve the problem. So that's what I'm saying. I think there's gonna be a massive gun exodus. I've said it before the beginning. I think there's gonna be there's gonna be guns are gonna go. And that's gonna be cause much more pain too.
We have to wrap things up. Lara, thank you. I hope we didn't keep you longer than you wanted to, and you're just staying. I hope you weren't staying just to be polite, but we are going.
I would be lying if I told you, Dan, that I was not looking forward to my first drink of the evening, but it was delightful to be with all of you.
Delayed that drink, which will make it all the sweeter. You're welcome. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Podcast at comedyseller.com for your questions, comments, suggestions. We'll see you next time.